We are activating your unique self-discovery one show at a time. The Orchard of Wisdom Self-Discovery podcast are at your fingertips, just waiting to inspire and invite you in discovering just how awesome you really are and how to navigate through life in joy, enrichment, personal abundance, in mind, body, spirit, heart, and soul. All the people we bring you are here to serve you on your journey of life. Do enjoy our next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Mental Health Awareness right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest all the way from Australia, I believe, is Anthony Metivier. Metivier, how am I pronouncing that?
Metivier.
Metivier. We're going to be talking about a rather fascinating subject today. He has a methodology, a modern approach to improving all areas of memorization. Well, I don't know about you, at 67, memory is definitely going, and I live with an almost 89-year-old with short-term memories pretty well gone. So how do we train our brain and exercise it for optimum brain health? Eliminating information on overload, memory for general self-improvement, confidence, personal mastery, business achievement, and memory-based meditation for focus, concentration, and mental clarity. He is the get the tongue right there, founder of Magnetic Memory Method, a systemic 21st century approach to memorizing foreign language vocabulary, names, music, poetry, and much more in ways that are easy, effective, and fun. We are in a world of oversaturation. We do not take the time to just digest information. We're all constantly overloading with the next thing. And consequently, I don't know if our memory actually even has a chance to retain anything because it's next, next, next. And I think training the actual brain to digest, take in, and put into a memory bank is something that we all desperately need to learn. So I am intrigued, Anthony. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. Memory is a funny thing, isn't it? It's that as you age, it can go as we see more and more people today just taking on so much, overloading. And the memory it can only do so much. And if you keep piling it on top of the other, not letting it digest, where does it go but disappear? So then we end up with, oh God, I should have remembered that, but I didn't remember that. And you say you have a wonderful methodology and how to remember the important things?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not necessarily mine. It's thousands and thousands of years old.
Mm-hmm.
And a great thinker and teacher of memory, Tyson Yunkaporta, he calls us custodians of the memory tradition, or at least invites us to be. And so in some sense, there's that. And, you know, I do research around it. I do personal practice and teach people how to use the techniques. But it's a very, very old technique. And it's really what people used to carry entire books in their minds when they couldn't carry them on their backs.
Right.
And we can still use them just as well, although we don't have perhaps as much time to deal with entire books. And that's okay, though, because they didn't have time to recite entire books either. They used to test each other and have fun little games around that. But I don't think they listen to each other do audiobook renditions live back then either, because there was only so many hours in the day then as
exactly.
well.
You know, 24 hours for everybody. You know, it's the same for everyone. Do you think that we've become too reliant on our little apparatuses, our phones, our computers, or everything else to remember things for us, as opposed to actually kind of choosing to remember something?
I think some people certainly have become more reliant on it. I don't know if reliance is the issue. I think it's being yanked around by it that's the problem. So, you know, I'm reliant on the ground, you know, but the ground doesn't somehow just, you know, grab my attention randomly all the time. So reliance is less of an issue to me, as opposed to behavioral reconditioning, which has many, many implications beyond just fracturing attention. But also, we know that rote repetition from a lot of studies reduces critical thinking. And so just go to Twitter for mass examples in the reduction of critical thinking. And it's not just the medium, but it's the repetition that degrades thought. So those are the things that concern me more than somebody, relying to look something up on the internet. We've always had devices to look things up, and there's nothing wrong with that.
One of the things that I have become very observant of over the years of doing this, I've been doing this 10 years now, is that you can send out information to people, but people don't read anymore. They skim, pick a word here, word there, and kind of come to their own assumption. And then they ask the question, well, what about da 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 da? But it was on the document. And I think, people aren't kind of taking the time to even take in information. It's everything seems to be the abbreviation.
Well, I'm not sure that that's a new issue at all. We tend to romanticize the past, and we think, oh, back in the day, everybody learned Latin and Greek and so forth. And certainly there was a greater concentration of that sort of thing, but it doesn't mean that everybody under the sun read every dotted I and crossed T in the contract. It's precisely the case that law is such an old profession because people didn't read in detail back in the day. So again, I think that our real issues are not so much that anything has changed in the world. Certainly there's a fire hose that has turned on, and that's different. There's connectivity things that are very, very different. But in terms of massive amounts of people not paying attention to absorbing what is really said and really understanding, that's not a new problem. That's a very old one. And this is part of how hierarchies in society form, and why we end up with leaders we'd rather not have, etc. This is a very old problem.
Yes.
Old indeed.
So I suppose the resolving of it is kind of pay attention, really look at the information and retain it. And it's the retaining of the information that I find that most people find a challenge with. You've got some people that can recite a phone number from their childhood, but they can't remember what they did yesterday or even today. And that's got nothing to do with age. It just seems to be we retain certain things and not others. Why is that?
Well, it does have something to do with paying attention, for sure. And it's not clear to me, actually, that age and memory are related in the same way that we think it is. I've encountered many young people who can't remember things either. I remember when I was a kid, don't you remember what your mom told you? What?
That was only yesterday.
I mean, we often create these mythologies. It's the same thing in language learning. People are like, oh, kids, they pick up languages so easy. Are you kidding? I was a professor for 10 years. I met 21-year-olds who still can't write a sentence. So it's not all that clear about who learns at what age and so forth. I think when it comes to retention, it comes down to paying attention. And then there are certain things like luck. So Harry Lorraine, one of the great memory teachers who wrote many, many books about memory, he said to me one time, I talked to him on the phone and got some advice about how to teach memory. And he said, the thing that you have to understand is that just knowing about the miracle of what training your memory can do is already transformative, because people don't know that it's possible for them. But it starts with paying attention. And then often it starts because you have this pain that you have to solve, because you notice that you're not getting ahead in life, or you're suffering for a variety of reasons. You've got to do something about it. And then that from there comes the wish that people would teach these techniques in schools. But they do. And the fact of the matter is that we don't know why that some people pay attention and others don't. It's part of the crazy pinball machine of the world. Some people do hear about memory very early on. They do learn to associate, or they're already doing it, which I did as a kid at a certain level. I just had a natural proclivity for imagining things in a particular way that led me to go on these mental adventures, that led me to pay attention to different things in a way that other people didn't, which led me to doing a particular career in university, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of luck that's involved in all of this. So the answer is, if you want these things, create your own luck. And that's very, very doable. It's scientifically doable, actually.
Do you think that it's a lot to do with also the way each one of us are wired? Like, we have personality traits, we have particular tendencies towards things, and some people, you've got a case of autistic kids that maybe can't string a sentence together, but can suddenly play Mozart in every note absolutely brilliantly.
Mhm.
Is there a case of kind of wiring or personality traits that some are really good at retaining and others aren't because their attention span is elsewhere, or different aptitudes?
I think there's a lot to that. I mean, there's the personality types, the ocean structure. Openness is a big thing, and but I don't think it's that simple. I think it's more of a combination effect. So, you know, you might have a strong proclivity towards openness, for example, in your personality profile. But what if you're encountering something on Thursday and your openness is closed, right?
Mm,
Like, do you then have the wherewithal in yourself or the self insight to try again on Tuesday?
mm,
When your openness meter is recharged, right? So
right,
there's a lot of, I really think it comes down to circumstance, and this is why there's endless arguments about the education system being broken, and yet Steven Pinker is enlightenment now, everything's getting better. Like, how can it both be true? And
right,
yet they are both true. Things are getting better and they are broken at the same time, and it's just this kind of endless rotation of personality traits, proclivities
mm,
meeting opportunity, and this thing just fires off. Then that's why some people argue that the population needs to go up, while other people are saying, no, we need the population to go down. And the population up people, they know about randomness, they know about luck, they know that we're going to get 55 Steve Jobs in 100 years instead of one, if we
right,
just have enough people bouncing against each other to have the opportunity for different personality proclivities to just meet opportunity. And when
right.
when preparation meets opportunity, there
Yes.
is no ceiling, as they say.
Well, there's some people that just believe anything is possible. That is the vocabulary, right? And
Mm.
even out of adversity, there's an opportunity in it. And there is, even whatever you go through in life, whatever life does, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. You're discovering your strengths, your abilities, and so many people come out, the other side saying, I had no idea I was capable of this, or I could do that, or the person I've become now was so worth what I went through. And there becomes a broadening of the mind, a broadening of the psyche, a broadening of seeing possibilities and opportunities, and a more of a connection with self. And then I think kind of the world for them becomes smaller in a sense, but it becomes more directional and more focused in what they want to do.
Yes, as the great Tony Buzan said, who created the World Memory Championships, the rules will set you free. And this is one of the distinguishing factors, is when we notice the parameters that govern particular disciplines and we devote ourselves to them, by taking on the rules, we actually have more productivity at the end. That limit is a lens that
Mm,
magnifies. So again, that just comes down to a lot of things coming together for people, which is why
mm,
there's teachers, why there's
yeah.
educators who are just projecting messages. And the more trees there are in the forest, the more likely you're going to run into them. But
Yes.
it's a complicated thing, but at the end of the day, it's also incredibly simple.
Yes.
And this is the cool thing about the internet, is it's just been an explosion in education.
And that's the beauty of it. I mean, there is always that human kind that will exploit, and that is who they are. They are the exploiters in a negative way. And then there are always the others that see the opportunities and the creativity of what is in front of them. And if we can invite the mind to be more creative and more exploratory, more wondrous in the sense of adventure, we would broaden that whole spectrum of what is possible. But I think a lot of the time we limit ourselves by old programming, but also by societal's programming of what you should be, when you should be, and how you should be. And if we could break that mold and just be who we really are and what we're designed to be and travel that path, I think we really will see a lot more illumination up there.
Yes, it's quite possible. I'm a little more stoic in the sense that I don't know that there is a should be or designed to be sort of way of things, and everybody has to decide those things on their own. But the beauty of taking on memory techniques is if you find something that is evidence to you and that switches on for you, you can do two things. You can remember what it is verbatim, and then you can also train your memory to bring back that knowledge or wisdom or set of instructions just so that it happens to you in the same way that people crave going to the gym, or they crave certain activities. They're artists, they've just got a sketch. It's because their procedural memory has started to create a pattern that does them instead of, you know, you having to do it. And that's comes from a level of memory. So you can essentially make yourself do things even when you don't feel like it, just by training yourself and developing a habit. So
yeah, we take, you know, kind of the ultimate soldier is being trained methodically to think a certain way, but we can do the same thing for ourselves. Is that if there's something we want to do and we think, well, I can't do it, or I'm not equipped that way, well, maybe you are and you just don't know it, and you just need the training in order to make it happen.
Yeah, the training is a big thing, and there's so many things people can do that if they want to, and if they focus their minds on it, and if they're lucky enough to discover it. The soldier metaphor is interesting. A lot of people misquote Nietzsche, the whole thing, if it doesn't kill you, it only makes you stronger. But actually what Nietzsche said, the exact quote is, from the military school of training, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. He's making a joke, which is, you know, don't train yourself to the point of breaking yourself. You don't have to go to war necessarily. Right. You don't have to destroy yourself in order to have this sort of training effect. And again, that's one of the beauties of reading a lot, paying attention to what people are actually saying instead of whatnot. So you don't live a life full of cliches when you talk about social training and so forth. And this is the mass repetition that reduces critical thinking, is you just, oh, I hear that. You think you know what it means. You didn't even get it from the source. You didn't get the full context of the quote. You didn't even get it in the book. And then you're repeating this thing. Well, what doesn't kill you makes you strong. Well, that's not even remotely what it meant, even if those were the exact words, because they took off the first half of the quote, and they probably didn't read the whole book, and they didn't get the sense of it. But yeah, things like that are really, really important, because training can destroy you also. So you've got to have balance, and you've got to really make sure that it's got a sort of holistic vision that you've created for yourself, and test it, like reality check it, because there's fanaticism and all kinds of exaggeration. And I know this because I've done it. It's gone over the top, and it wasn't healthy, you know. So you got to find the balance in it and really think about that military school of training.
Yes. I mean, there's an edge to everything, isn't it? And, you know, like, you push yourself to the edge, but do you need to prove yourself to push yourself over? You know, it's right. What are you proving, you know, if you flop over the cliff there? And it's like, we've got this tendency that we need to push ourselves to the limit. And it's like, kind of why? Yeah, we can push ourselves to learn more, but it's not about the limit. It's really about the expansion of knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, and hopefully with an eye to continuing to expand it. And the great Socrates, you know, saying that the only thing I know is that I don't know anything.
Exactly.
and just allow for constant exploration, revisitation. One thing I do with my students all the time is I teach them about repetition, and how that repetition is absolutely essential, because repetition is always difference. But we tend to get bored and we go, oh, I've heard this before, or I've seen it before, and so forth. And at some level, our lives are a lot like Groundhog Day. If we keep thinking it's the same, we miss the opportunity to actually make it different, because we don't see the difference in the same. And it's when we note those granular little patterns that we can intervene on. Otherwise, we're just sort of bowled over by the physical laws that govern reality.
I heard that it takes 8 positives to undo 1 negative.
Can be.
So In other words, that to insert a kind of a reprogram or to change your mind to go into a different pattern, that you need to insert, at least 8 different patterns there to break the old pattern. And very often, if we're
Right.
wanting to train our mind, we really got to break the old patterning and set up a different rhythm, don't we?
Yeah, and they say in memory psychology that most things have to be repeated 7 times before you even start to pay attention to them,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite likely, although we can use memory training to break that cycle. Uh, yeah, I mean, repetition is just built into the nature of things, but we often resist it
Mm.
because part of the brain requires novelty. And there's some memory research that shows the production of norepinephrine is higher when you have novel situations. And that's a chemical related to memory formation, which is why we often seek the new, even though the new is often just the same thing. We watch some new series and it seems all fresh and sparkling until we realize, I've seen
It's the
this
same old
kind of
story.
story
Yes.
before. There's a
Yeah.
switch for the new one. We think that that's so personal to us, but
Yeah.
that's our brain chemistry
Mm.
guiding our behaviors because it's seeking certain
Mm.
states and balances. And this is why certain traditions have emerged over time of battling that. Buddhism, for example,
Mm.
and Chan and all these kinds of meditative contemplative traditions. They're trying to break this cycle that you need new, and 8 repetitions of this and 7 things like that to remember anything or pay attention to it. Could you just cancel all that stuff and just be, without any of that? And then that's very instructive. You might not become enlightened, but you would learn a great deal about how all that repetition is not necessarily leading you where you want to go. And there's other things you could repeat, such as the repetition of precisely the same in order to experience the wonder of this present moment.
Mm.
uh, just being what it is, which is changing enough already without you
Yes.
needing to impose change upon it or have your brain direct you to change the channel all the time.
It doesn't matter how stagnant we think we are, everything is moving around us. And if we
Mm.
step into the same flow, and be aware, then we're actually part of that flow. But rigidity is only going to break you. And we really need to have flexibility, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Bruce Lee thing, be water, my friend,
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can, because the wind will take down a brick wall
Mm-hmm.
eventually, but
Mm-hmm.
it won't bend grass for long.
Right, right, exactly. So how do we improve our memory? I, I have to admit, I've always had a problem with names. Um, I am a storyteller in my head. There's always a story going on. I'm dimensional travel, all of that type of thing. But when it comes down to names, I will remember a person's story, but the name is always a problem. That's always been an issue with me. So
Yeah.
can we actually improve things like that, that we know are blockages and we don't know why, but they're there nevertheless?
Yeah, absolutely. And you seem primed to be able to do it because story is one of the great
Mm-hmm.
ways of improving memory. So if I'm meeting Sarah Troy, right, I can think, I think it was, there's a royalty person, Fergie, I think maybe, Sarah Ferguson or something. She was a duchess or something like this.
Oh,
Anyway,
right. Yes, yes.
some Sarah person is coming to my mind from TV when I was a kid in
Oh,
Canada,
Sarah
and
Ferguson was, yeah, she was married to Prince William.
maybe, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know the whole scheme, but I remember her. So now I can think of the story, and I just remember her on TV, and I can think, wow, she's going to Troy in, the Iliad or something, and make a little story out of this. So now the Iliad is not Troy, right? So I might, think of the Trojan horse to start to get a sound similarity there. And then as I'm doing this kind of game in my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, and then there was this kid in school named Troy, and he was this great sports hero and everything. So as I'm telling a little story and mixing and weaving and so forth, I'm finding just the right association.
Mm,
And it's quite close in this case, But it would be the same thing if I ran into a guy, which I have done at a memory demonstration, and it was just, what are we going to do? But his name was Gengador Dianand. And I just thought NWA, which is a rap band that went out of their way to look like a gang, they're banging at the door, and back to royalty, Princess Diana is fighting them back with a ampersand for the symbol for and Dianand. Anyway, I got it back, and it was just a little story,
Right.
just like that. But what we're really doing first is paying attention to the spelling of the word, the sounds, and what else is like that. So that would be the step. Pay attention, then create a story based on sound similarities or image similarities.
So it's kind of an association. Associate the name in the story, and the little things that will take you back to what that name is, so like little steps of association, which is very, very interesting. Yeah, because I actually remember my stories very, very easily, and I always have names in my stories. So perhaps what I should do is, especially people I know I'm going to be interviewing, is insert their names already in the story before I even get to the interviewing. Then remember the story, and then the name should come up.
Yeah. You can get a little bit more advanced than this, but that's the core of it. And it's just mental Lego. It's just playing around with associations in your mind. And if you take it to the Lego level, Lego is, plastic that you can stick on a foundation, and it will stay there.
Yes.
So one thing I do it in my practice with memorizing foreign language vocabulary and phrases, or I study Sanskrit, like philosophy in Sanskrit, and memorize all this stuff, or names at an event. I actually put those associations, those stories in place. So a memory palace is a mental recreation of a room. And in that room, you assign spots, ideally spots that you already have a general sense of, because you want it to be a memory palace, not a memorized palace.
Right.
So that's just work. We want to play. So the simplest way to do that is corner, wall, right? And then you just think, okay, which is the dead end here? And you start in that dead end so that you can go a simple thing, corner, wall, then the door. And then you do the next room and the next room, or the hallway. And if you just follow these simple rules, then it's truly a memory palace, because you don't have to memorize anything. You know the building pretty well, and you follow it. So now, like, let's say Charlie, I meet Charlie, and I stick in my mind Cheshire the cat at that part of the bookshelf. And then I meet a Sarah Troy. Now that little story I told is maybe over here. And then whoever Gengador Dianand is over there. And then at the memory demonstration, for example, when I'm going and saying, okay, I know all your names, do you believe me? And then I say, okay, so Charlie, and then Sarah Troy, and then Gengador Dianand. And I'm just thinking in my mind where I placed all these associations. And it can go even deeper than that with these techniques, but that's the core of it.
Right.
And with a bit of practice and training, you really can memorize an entire book. I haven't completed an entire book yet, but I've gotten close. And it's just, ultimately, it's not that efficient because nobody wants to listen to me recite them. So usually what I do is I just memorize the key points, which is good enough.
Right, exactly. At least you got them in order, right? So basically, like, you're taking a house, you're looking at the rooms, and then you're placing people in the rooms, and then you're remembering who is in which room, but kind of threading it with the storyline.
Yeah. And the journey is also a story, because it's this spot comes before this spot and so forth. And in fact, that's where we get a convention in English. We often say, well, in the first place, Well, that comes from the Latin Roman orators who used to give their speeches. The audience knew they were using a memory palace, so they would just say, why don't you memorize my talk along with me? In the first place, blah, 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 blah. And then in the second place, and they're literally talking about the place in their memory palace. And the audience would memorize what they were saying as they went along.
Well, we're very visual people, aren't we? So if we can see what we're hearing, I think the vision stays with us more sometimes than the words stay with us.
That's true. A lot of people are visual, but there's a catch. A lot of people aren't, and they struggle with these techniques because they approach them visually. I didn't for a long time approach them visually, because turns out there's yet another name for yet another condition, which is aphantasia, which is the lack of a mind's eye. Now, when I was a kid, they called this imagination deficit disorder, which made zero sense to me, but that's what they said that I had, because I would write these strangely cerebral stories, and I would never talk about how anything looked, never talk about, but I didn't see it.
Right, exactly.
I just thought about it. So the beauty of it is you can still use memory techniques, but you just play around a little bit more. What does it feel like? What's the kinesthetic sense? Can you hear something in your mind? What emotions are there? Are there any concepts? Which I'm heavily on the concept level. I mean, I just told you the thing, like, oh, NWA, that's a gang. They look like a gang. That's a concept more than any sort of visual thing. But with practice, I actually wound up starting to see images. So it's kind of weird. I don't necessarily even like it, but it is possible if you are aphantasic to start to become hyper phantasic if you choose to practice that sort of thing. But it's not necessary for the memory techniques to work.
Right, as you said, yeah, we can be kinesthetic or audio or visual. I'm a visualer for sure. That's how I remember the audio. I actually can't even turn the vision off. It's perpetually going. There's always something going on in my mind's eye. And the audio is the dialogue that goes with the picture, and they have to be together for me to retain it. I have dyslexia, so my problem is reversing things or putting things out of order, and so that is always a bit of a challenge for me. But it is actually, a lot of people talk about write by hand. It's better for the memory. You're more attached, hand and paper. That was the worst thing for me. When I actually finally got my computer at 46, that's where I found a voice, because I could correct, the wrong way rounds and things like this. I could rearrange it. And I found that's where I found my freedom to express, where by hand and writing, I can't. So there's always many answers, aren't there? You've just got to look for the one of like, all right, you're not the seer, I'm the ultimate seer, but maybe somebody is not the audio person or the kinesthetic. And it's like, well, what we're lacking in is perhaps we can train ourselves to bring up a level or two. And then what we're really good in, is obviously where we can really channel the memory bank in there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't do enough, or they don't have enough opportunity to explore enough ranges, visit enough dojos, and spend enough time in those dojos to work those things out, because there's many ways to get things done.
Yes.
And there's many writers who very famously dictated their books. James Joyce, from what I understand, hardly put pen to paper at all. He just spoke all that stuff. Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. Samuel Beckett was his secretary for a long time, if you can believe it. So it's extraordinary.
That would be more me. I'm meant to be writing my book, and I keep put it off, and I keep starting and stopping. But it would have to be me audioing it. I do, when I do write, it is the sound of it that is coming up, not the words speaking the sound speaking the words, if you know what I mean. So
yeah. Oh, there's experts out there you can hire. They'll just interview you and then bang out a book, and it'll be really well done.
Yes. I'm up for the challenge. I'm going to do it. It's just me actually laying out the time to do it, which that is, the procrastination. I'm a true colors coach as well. The 4 key personality traits, the Myers and Briggs things, and 4 different types of ways we receive and perceive information, how we interact. And I have found it always quite fascinating of the different personality types of where their forte and their strength is. And and obviously where they're lacking, and nobody's ever perfectly all 4. There's always a key one, a second one, there's always a low one. My low one would be most certainly the order, things in order, things, the rules and regulations, and you've got to do it this way, which I've always been one to, do I have to? Always challenging it. But there is something to be said about it in my old age, where I'm finding that certain kind of foundations to things helps build a better structure, right? So kind of really what you're talking about in the memory bank is kind of is that foundation in which to build from, to build your memory from.
Yeah. But it's, it's one of those things where once you know the rules, they're more flexible than they seem. And I also have an order issue. I mean, well, I just finished another book, and I narrated the whole thing to edit it, and it's just, wow, how do I get these words backwards, or how does this clause is totally out of order, this paragraph should be here, and I just endless sort of correction in my own writing. But that's part of what the art is. The art is this sort of weaving, and it's the same thing with memory. So if I'm memorizing some long form stuff, and I'll go back, and often I'll test just to check, by using writing, speaking of writing in my notebook, and I'll go and look, and I'll go, oh, but I got those words backwards. And it's not because I failed in the Memory Palace or anything like this. It's just, I'll just correct it. And wow, imagine that. My worst mistake was that the words were out of order, or I missed a little ending thing in some bizarre Sanskrit word that I'm just learning, or what have you. It's fixable faster because there was at least an attempt to follow a particular structure.
Things can always be rectified, but don't stop yourself from doing it because you think, oh, it's got to be perfect. And I think, let's take away the word perfect altogether, because what is perfection? It's like art. It's in the eye of the beholder. What's perfect for one isn't for another. And if you're so busy tied up with that, it's got to be, I think we can stifle our own creativity and block our own ability to grow and allow things to be.
Yeah. Memory training tends to bring out perfectionist tendencies in people. And the best I can say is that that's not even remotely how it works. In the memory competition world, nobody wins because they were perfect. They win because they got the most points on that day. So, and they do make mistakes, even though there's one guy, Jonas von Essen, and I don't laugh because I'm laughing at him. I'm just laughing because it's just very common. He won the World Memory Championships. The next day or later that day, he's on an international or a national program, and the host of it was like the Tonight Show or something. The host says, "So you won the World Memory Championships. Do you remember my name?" And here's the World Memory Champion, and he's just drawing a blank.
Yes.
So you can, and that hasn't happened to me in particular, but if I'm not paying attention and not using the techniques, it could also I've competed myself with a guy, Dave Farrow, who has 2 Guinness World Records for his memory, and I knew going in, there's no way I'm going to beat this guy. But the astonishing thing is because just that I allowed myself to go with it, I didn't make any mistakes at all, and I only did half as well as he did. But heck, he's got the 2 Guinness records, right?
Well, so, and again, I'm never into comparison, because I think, we can't compare apples and oranges. They're both fruits. And I think it is more to do with, did you do better, in competition with yourself, right? And that is the thing, is that, okay, I could have done better. What was putting me off today? When was my concentration? Or it's just not my day. And then the next day you find you're on, and like everything is absolutely there. And that's just the way it goes sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and the beauty of it is when you take those risks and you're open to it, and you don't have a hissy fit at the end if you fail or whatever, there's extraordinary lessons on the other side. Like the Dave Farrow scenario. He taught me, he basically, this isn't how it went, but he basically said, "You want to know how I beat you?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And he explained to me, I'm memorizing 6 cards per station. And I was like, holy cow, how do you do that? And then he's like, well, and he explained a lot about his memory system. And he also gave me the great gift of not totally explaining it. So then I thought about it, and I managed to get to a point where I can memorize 3 to 5 cards on the same station. I never quite got comfortable with 6 per station. and I've never competed again, and I only ever competed in the first place because it was for charity and for fun, because I'm just not interested in competition at all. But nonetheless, because I just, yeah, okay, for charity, let's do it. And sat there, I did way better than I ever would have imagined possible. And then he gave me the great gift of not only helping me push my own limit with that particular thing, but he didn't give me the whole story. So I had space to imagine my way into what might be possible. And when we're perfectionist about things, we miss all of that stuff.
And you know, somebody may do something A, B, and C, and you take the A, B, and go to D, and it works out for you, and that's okay. You know, just because somebody succeeds at A, B, and C doesn't mean you're meant to. You know, maybe you are meant to be the D and F and in there somewhere, and that is your success. And it's like, again, if we're flexible, you know, you can share the techniques, which you do in your book, The Victorious Mind, How to Master Memory, Meditation, and Mental Well-Being. You can share all those techniques and the how-tos, but how people apply it and where they slightly adjust it to fit them is up to them, isn't it? Because when people try and copy completely, I think they lose themselves. But if you can take the gist or the basics of it and then apply it and allow to see where you go with it, that's where you're going to get the most growth.
Yeah. It's exactly that, because one of the problems with so many memory books, memory courses, is that they say they're going to give you a system.
Yeah.
And it's not possible. You have to create your own.
Yeah.
And even if you copy someone else's system, you're going to modify it to the extent that you might as well have just gone in with the spirit of building your own system in the first place.
So it's okay to have kind of, here are the Lego blocks, right? This is advantageous for your foundation to put them in this way, but how you build the next level is up to you.
Exactly. And, you know, those examples I gave you, I don't even know if I'm correct about Sarah Ferguson, you know, but the reality is that works in my imagination, right? And somebody might be like, okay, so how do you get gang out of that rap band NWA, right? Well, I just do, and it works. So if you learn the methodology behind it, and put it into action, do a couple exercises, then you're not going to be able to explain necessarily why it works either. And it's kind of a hiccup in the memory training world, because there's entire industries where they give medical mnemonics, and they say, okay, so you got to remember the occipital bone. So just think about X, like an ox. Well, what if that just doesn't work for you? Wouldn't you be better off having somebody say, the way that we arrived at the ox for this is because we look at the sort of OCC, and that person might be saying, well, why don't you just tell me to look at OCC, because I can think of like the Occident or whatever, that makes more sense to me. Or maybe they know, I don't know, OJ Simpson or something, and that makes they think of orange juice with cc's of cocaine or whatever, you know, like there's just many ways to think about it, but you need that method, and you can arrive at all kinds of things.
So basically what you're doing is giving some ingredients, but let the people put those ingredients together how they see it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's partly my market advantage, because hardly anybody else even talks this way about memory techniques. I haven't yet seen anybody actually. They're so example based, but it does work. The examples do work for some people some of the time, but I'm trying to set my sights a little higher than some people some of the time. And I don't have any fantasy of getting everybody onto this, but nonetheless, if it were possible to get more people involved, it would likely come from having, oh wow, this is just playing with material and getting to arrive at my own conclusions, rather than what the other memory training seemed to me is they turn it into a memory task. Oh, I have to remember an ox to remember occipital lobe. Well, no, you want to actually use something that's already in your mind, so that you're reducing cognitive load, not adding another task on top of a task on top of a task. We want to zoom it just down to immediate association as much as possible.
So as you said, you're selling a technique, not a system. A system, A to B, you know, B to C, C to D, got to do it this way for it to work. When you're selling a technique, you're selling a particular style that you then can adapt to your own style. And so it's, again, it's the Lego parts, but how you put them together will be how you see it, how you interact with it, and what works for you. But if we don't know the basics, which is what we need to know, like the building of the house, putting the people in the house, or many other things, are we auditory? Are we kinesthetic? Are we visual? What are we? How can I use this in the best way that becomes a format for me that works? But if, as you said, if it's somebody else's system, it may work for them, but it doesn't mean it works for everybody. So you need to take these techniques and basics understanding and make it your own system because it works for you.
Yeah. And, there's definitely selling going on for sure, but it's hard enough to give this away for free because it's reality, it's the real deal. And the minute there's effort involved, so many people run screaming. And
God, do they? Work? No, I'd rather be miserable.
When people subscribe on my website to my free course, people email me all the time. How are you able to give this away for free? And I say, well, yes, I use the word free, but actually it isn't free. It takes your time, your energy, your concentration, your focus, and your will, and all
your
this
participation.
Sort of
Yes.
Yeah. And power to you. I mean, do it. And so many people do get my paid courses because they're touched, they're transformed, and they know that this goes deeper. And we can. I have monthly meetings with my inner circle group, and we go for hours on end, just getting into all this stuff. I mean, there's a guy, Chris, who recently came in. He's into chess, and it's not something that I do, but I understand what he's talking about. And he's preparing and then presenting various takes on how to memorize chess moves, openings, end games, all this kind of stuff. Makes sense to me. I'm able to chat with him about it to sort of translate how this might apply to other things. And so we just have the most extraordinary time. But the real cost isn't, there's this membership fee, like going swimming at the gym. The cost is, you can't talk with us. You can't have this conversation if you don't do the course. It won't make any sense to you. In the same way, you're not going to go to the Conservatory of Music and they're like, oh, let's switch to the Mixolydian mode for this. I mean, we're in Phrygian, but let's go to Mixolydian. You're like, huh?
Yeah.
You got to pay the price if you want to play the music, basically. Right. And that is learning at the end of the day. And I can help you make it as fast as it gets, but yeah, there is no free at the end of the day, and there's no selling. You got to sell yourself at the end of the day if you want to do it. And I can help. I can talk. I got thousands of hours of recorded podcasts and videos where it has transcended marketing, and it's transcended teaching. It's become something else that the algorithms have supported, and they like it enough to make it all work. But it almost takes on a quality of church in some sense, but without a religion.
And why are we drawn to religions a lot of the time? Because it's a kind of a sense of belonging. It's a sense of feeling in a place that someone cares. And when you have somebody that's on the same wavelength as you, and you can both broaden your minds and go places without, kind of restriction, be free falling. It's like when you see a dancer that's done something choreographed and then you play the same music and have them be free, and that freestyle is always so much more expressive. And so, but they still had to know all the techniques in order to do the freestyle, right? So that's the thing. The more you know in the technique, the more you have in the foundation of the tools and the skills, the more you can apply to actually be free falling.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned free falling. That reminds me, Peter Sage told me one time that I guess it's level 2 or something like this in skydiving. He says that the dive you'll never forget is when you pass this certain certification, because that's the one where you have to pack your own parachute.
Right. Yes. It's now up to you whether you free fall. Yeah. And that comes down to another word that we don't talk about enough, is responsibility. If we want to have a better memory, if we want to be able to do more in life and have more out of life, not only have we got to participate in our own life, but we also have to take responsibility for our own lives. People are constantly waiting for that downloadable app or the blue pill, green pill, whatever other pill. And instead of, the more you immerse yourself in the practice of, the more you go on that discovery of self and your abilities and refine them, the more you discover what else you can do and what else is out there. But you've got to take that responsibility to participate, integrate, and allow, because nothing happens unless you're willing to do that.
Yeah, and this is the great puzzle. I really don't know why some people have the initiative and why others don't. I think we can tell a story about it, and some of it has emerged, like the principle of luck and just different aspects in a personality and so forth. But the great sign that you have a chance is what Harry Lorraine said. People are transformed just by hearing about memory techniques.
Yes.
And if you feel that inkling, whether it's memory techniques or entrepreneurialism or whatever, if you feel that inkling, that's the sign that you can.
Yes.
And so now the next thing is shockingly simple, and that is take some action. And I mean, I almost feel badly for doing it because it sounds too simple. It sounds like it must be more complex than this. But I tell this to my own students all the time. I tell this to my friends, and it sounds bad on the surface, but it's absolutely true. I read the book, I look at the steps, then I follow the steps, and I don't think about it too much. I just, and then after I've done that, I look at the results, then I start to think about it. But there's a tendency, and I do it myself. That's why I started to talk to myself like I was a little child. It's just, oh, but what about this? And then what about that? And I like all this sort of stuff. And then I realized, no. You just gotta just try it as described. And if you don't understand what's described there, then get out a piece of paper. Maybe typing is more appropriate, or dictating, whatever it is, but externalize it somehow, and then say, what exactly don't I understand here? And when you start to describe what you don't understand, you realize that actually you understand a little bit more than you think, because you have to repeat what it is that you don't understand. And then when you get it external, verbal, in your own writing or so forth, then all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense. Man, you could save yourself a lot of time and money on coaching and the next shiny object book or course or whatever, by just dealing with the one that you got.
I'm a person who, I do my own shows every week. Very often I just may have one word and I press record and that word becomes, or I may write something out and then we go from there. But it is, I'm not thinking about it, I'm doing it, and then from there comes the understanding of what I've done and what it really means. And a lot of people need to think about it and strategize about it and lay it all out. Well, if that's what works for you, okay. But we've all got to understand our own style or forte of doing things. But the thing is, it's not just to do it and dismiss it. It's to do it and understand why you did it.
Yeah.
What does it mean? What are you meant to do with it? All right. Because our inner voices have so much to say, but we get in the way. And if we can allow our inner voices to come out, whether it be through art, music, writing, speaking, we actually then get this feedback that, here's the answer you've been looking for. It's been inside of you all the time. And until you expressed it, you couldn't hear it.
Yes. Yeah. It's repetition, right?
Yeah.
It's inside you because you've consumed it. You've read it or heard the instruction or whatever. Then when you project it outward, it returns inside you. But now it's just more powerful or more clear or what have you. So it's there's so many things that aren't nearly as mysterious as they seem, or as we make them.
Well, we like to highfalutin things. We like to make them more complex because it makes us feel smarter. But one thing I've understood for all the years that I've been around doing what I've been doing is that the simplicity and your why are you doing it? What are you trying to get out of this? Because if there isn't an attachment to something, You know, why do you want your memory to be better? What are you going to do with that memory? What is it for? If we don't know our why, then we're not connected to anything. If we understand our why, it becomes that driving force. I want to understand, or I want to refine, or I want to use this in a different way. But it's asking ourselves why. And if it's an external answer, you know, fame, fortune, this and that, then it's a wrong why. But if it's more of the internal one, because it will make me better here, or it will make me better there, or it will make me more comprehensive here and there, then that's the right answer. So we've got to ask that question first.
Definitely. And remember to ask it.
Yes. We need the memory program to remember to ask ourselves the question. So you have improve your memory in 8 days or less by using 8 unusual techniques. That is your free memory informational kit. And then of course you go from there, where you you know, people can sign up and do a different type of course with you, which is what else do you have from there?
I have a program called the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, which is a self-study program. It's primarily video based. It's got exercises and so forth. And then for people who have that, if they're interested, we have monthly meetings where we hop in the magnetic Zoom room and go through whatever we're working on. And it's like a combination of coaching and strategy for people with, you know, learning projects, and who for whatever reason just want that extra touch. And I record all those, so there's a massive archive. And this is not exactly a good salesmanship, but nobody really needs it if they can complete the course on their own. But if you do want that community, and it is just an additional service, it's not the burger, but it's the fries. And we just have a great time in that. And it's just hard to express really what an astonishing thing it is to have been doing that since 2015 and have all these recordings of those meetings. And then when new people come into it and they've completed the program, and then they say, wow, when you say the rabbit hole has no end, you really mean it. And,
and well, it's expansion, isn't it? Everything about it is an expanding on. Right. Yes. And when we understand that there is no limit to expansion, it is, you know, infinity and beyond. It's that we can know everything there is to know. A computer can know everything there is to know, but it still doesn't know everything. And the more that we're willing to understand that we know this, but we don't know that, and I'm still willing to learn, right up to the day we go, when we make an exit in this world, I think is the more we're actually alive, right? Because we're participating in life. We're constantly wondrous as what else is there to learn.
Yep. And it really has no end. I mean, there are so many books that I still haven't read about memory techniques from many eras. You know, there's just so much, and I go and I read them, and then I bring this forward, everything I learn. I do it on my podcast. I do it on the YouTube channel. I mean, it's just all over the place, on the blog. And for whatever reason, I'm gifted to have this endless interest in this topic, both contemporary science, what the competitors are doing, and what the ancient texts say, and so forth. And it never fails to fascinate me. But one of the reasons why it doesn't fail to fascinate me is because I practice myself every day. And it's so obvious to me that there's so much more to learn about it. And it's deeply fulfilling. It's the most deeply fulfilling thing that I've ever known. And many people tell me that as they get into it, even if they have no interest in memorizing anything remotely like what I memorize. And we have some scientific research about why that might be. There's a great research team headed by a guy named Dr. Tim Dalglish, and they have found that using precisely this location-based strategy that I shared with you helps people with PTSD, helps them with depression, and part of it has to be with increased dopamine. And then in terms of habit formation, you get the increase of myelin, and you know, your opioid receptors are just firing like crazy when you're using these techniques, which leads to just a better mental state. So
I would imagine this would be excellent practice for people who have had strokes, you know, or even brain injuries, you know, because it is a retraining of the brain. The brain is incredibly resilient. So if a particular area is damaged, there's another area you can go to, and it's just a question of training the brain. So for people who have had some, brain injuries, or people with strokes or anything like this, I would imagine this is a wonderful practice to kind of get them back into a flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will do things to you, depending on how you approach it, that not only would rehabilitate, or it can anyway, there's lots of indications that it can also fend off against problems in the first place. So
Like Alzheimer's?
Yep.
Dementia?
Casper Bormans, I think is his name. He has a really nice TEDx where he talks about some research he's doing in this area and some initial findings. But if you take one case study, whether you use memory techniques or not, I recommend that you do, because most people wind up using them in one form or another. So you might as well, hit the ground running. Language learning has been shown to fortify the brain against things like Alzheimer's and dementia, because it creates what's called cognitive reserve. And so essentially, a person who's bilingual or whatnot has 32 years of cognitive reserve against these kinds of issues. And basically what that means is that a person could still get dementia and Alzheimer's, but their brain is going to fight against it in a way that a person who doesn't have some second language ability won't. And it has to do with the density of neural connections. The reserve is stronger. That myelin that I talked about, it's actually like filaments or threads that wrap around the neuronal connections.
Like
And
fiber
it gives
optics?
them, yeah, you could think of it that way. And also your neuronal, the neurons, they have what are called dendritic spines. And they, in people who are bilingual, they're much more turgid. They have a lot of pressure in them, and they're quite strong, these spines. But if you don't use that stuff, they wilt, and they can be, like dead plants inside of your brain. So
Does it have to be a language, or could it be just that your brain is extended in other areas, or does it have to be a language?
I don't necessarily know the answer to that question, because this is the finding of a specific study. I would imagine that there's going to be an advantage that a language has over, say, higher professional knowledge in psychology or something like that, because psychology is going to, maybe it has enough terminology, but it's not going to have the grammatical variations, and it's not necessarily going to trigger your ears and your mouth and reading and writing and all that sort of stuff in this dual language thing. But the question is good, and the intuition would suggest that if you were to only apply it to something challenging like psychology or the law or what have you, then you're more likely to get a greater advantage. But I don't know necessarily that those areas have been studied in that way to find.
Well, it is said that introduce yourself to something new, no matter what your age is, because that keeps the neurons firing and keeps everything optimized. And one can have, like the basic, you're a podcaster as well. I've been doing this 10 years. I do 6 to 8 shows a week. I may be doing the same thing, but I'm always doing it with different people, different intrigue, different sparks of information. And I think it's engagement, I think is, a lack of engagement, I think is very deadly, because if you're not using it, you do lose it. And I think whether you speak many languages or not, be intrigued in learning new things, or, adaptation, keep everything firing, which I think is something really, really important to prevent, hopefully, Alzheimer's, for what I understand, is a lot of hereditary, and dementia is a lot of lifestyle.
Yeah, there's certainly those parameters that can be an influence, but I think we still know so little at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I'll make an argument for language learning anyway, which is, and I just know it because I've done it. There is an extraordinary wealth of experience that you just don't have with only your mother tongue. And it's ways of thinking about the world, and just a felt and a lived certainty. I mean, when I learned German, this notion of Sehnsucht, and I can tell you intellectually what all that means, and you can go, wow, yeah, that's kind of cool that they think that way, and yada yada yada. But until you can actually say Sehnsucht, you know, and it's just there's a je ne sais quoi, as they say in French. I don't know what it is, but it's just so tremendously connective. And going to Germany and so forth, and knowing what people are saying and how they're saying it, you feel like you're in, I don't want to insult Germans, but you feel like you're in their family, you know, like it's just,
you're a part of the community.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Even with
I find musicians a lot that way, because the music is another language.
It is.
You know, whether they're writing the lyrics or writing the music, it is that expression. And you know, I've interviewed a great deal of musicians, and I find that, you know, the memorizing of the music for a start, but it is something they allow to happen, and it comes to them, and it becomes that story, you know, that they know, that they're then articulating and sharing. But I find that, I think in a lot of ways it is that other language that they are speaking in, you know, through the music, and an artist very often is speaking through the art. So great if you can do the languages. There's a lot of us that are closer to 70, so it's a bit late, but it's finding another way of expressing yourself in a different form of language that kind of can keep things firing and going, which I think is, you know, there are certain people that they retire and they sit in front of the TV and that's it, they're gone. And, you know, they literally do die very early because there's no engagement, there's no participation. Everything about them just starts breaking down. So in just as much as we need to keep our bodies active, we need to keep our minds active and constantly engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Music is probably one of the most foundational things. If I was the boss of the world, which thank goodness I'm not, but you know, everybody would know an instrument at least, or at least sing or something like that, and or at least have the opportunity to do it. But you know, to the person who's sitting and you know, just enjoying TV on the couch, you never know. Maybe they deserve it. I think that it can be. I would imagine I'd be the kind of person that would just sit and watch TV. And the reason why I say that is because if you are actively engaged in it, then it might not be the issue that it seems. I was a film studies professor for 10 years.
Right.
And when I got my PhD, they asked me about the theoretical grounding, and they wanted me to talk about Heidegger and all this sort of stuff. I said, you don't need no theoretical grounding in film studies. Here's how it works. Some producers have a big old bag of cash, and then they say, let's do some science. They don't say it that way, but they say, we're going to test the market. And then we're going to go and make all these whiz bang movies of Tom Cruise and jets and all this sort of stuff. And we're going to see if people like it. Right. And then if they do, then we're going to take that money and make some more. Right.
Right.
Now, I read all this academic literature, and there's endless chin scratching academics who are just like, the film industry and the TV industry is poisoning the minds of the world, and yada, yada, yada. They're just constant hypnosis and destroying culture and all this. And they're talking about the person sitting on the couch rotting. However, I also used to work at Queen Video in Toronto, and I used to rent movies to these so-called couch sitters. I think it's more rare than we think. There were extraordinary thoughts going on in the minds of these people about the stories that they were watching. They had opinions. They then read magazine stories about it, and they tracked what characters were doing in their lives and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's totally possible. And I know because I've done it. I spent years of my life sitting on a couch watching movies, and I designed my life so that all I had to do for years was go once a week to campus and then tell people what I thought about those movies. So it's not necessarily the case that you can't sit there. But if you
think
remember,
it comes into a question of what you're watching. You know, if you're watching something that actually ignites something inside of you that makes you question. It's like with a good book or a good show. If you're conversing about it afterwards, if you're wanting to share about it, if it's intrigued you, that it's, started a thought process, it served you, right? It keeps you engaged. It's the mindless stuff, especially reality stuff, that just is blurred out. But I think it's a question. My relaxation at night is to watch TV and watch some good shows. But I like the ones that really are the storytellers, that really leave you with something. And yes, for me, it always is, it will help with my own little movie that's going on in my head, that, I'll change the script, or the script is influenced by what I've seen. But I think if it still comes down to, are you just watching to switch off? Or are you watching to be engaged? It's still that engagement.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to play devil's advocate, but I don't know that there is such a thing as mindless content. I think that this is the goal of all spiritual traditions, is to sit there without a mind. So if you get that from so-called mindless entertainment, power to you. I mean, I think what we're really criticizing sometimes when we do that, I don't even know, but I'm a defender of it. And the reason why is because that, if there is one positive to, if I were to steel man my criticism of Twitter where we started, right? If there's one positive that our technology is doing, it's doing what the great spiritual traditions have been trying to do all along, which is to be right here, right now, in the eternal present, just being as you are, right? And so if we're going to relegate that to corporations, and Elon Musk is going to wire us all together through Neuralink and all that sort of stuff, and we didn't do it otherwise, and we didn't intervene, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles, because of engagement, right? But isn't that what we've wanted? Isn't that what the spiritual traditions have been trying to do all along? Mindlessness, not engagement, mindlessness. And I think that is not necessarily a bad thing. If it comes from technology, that's the way it came. Right. And that's what the singularity is all about, is precisely that. And not one amongst us is so special that we couldn't get away with just spending an entire life, watching TV. Who amongst us can say whether that's a right or wrong, and that one must be engaged? The reality is that the body is the problem, and the thoughts about the body is the problem. And so I don't know, but I don't believe in mindless entertainment. But I'm biased because I was a film studies professor, and it's all study material, whether it's reality TV or a commercial. Commercials are just as interesting and engaging and thought-provoking as anything else. But I'm a great defender. I used to work in factories to fund my PhD education, and they would teach me what The Simpsons really meant. Really smart people, extraordinary smart people, and they just would. That's the way their lives worked, that they were working for a gold watch at the end of 30 years. But they knew what was going on in The Simpsons better than I did. I'd say, can I borrow that from my essay? It's just very, very smart people out there. Even if I'm always
a person about feel your knowledge, don't think it. Because I work more in the knowingness of channeling. I know what I need to know when I need to know it. And it's about feeling it. So I do get what you're talking about, is that connection, whatever makes us feel that we are connecting to the source, to that unification of being in the same frequency, in the same vibration, which ultimately, cornerly, comes down to just simple love of self, love of life, love of each other. And if we could step into that love frequency and that love vibration, the answers are there. It's just, are we really willing to listen to what those answers are, and are we willing to participate and do something with that? Because ultimately, that's really where the frequency is, and anything that can get us to that love place, whether it be a corny commercial, a Hallmark movie, or something that really has provoked an intellectual thought, whatever gets us to be engaged and step out, perhaps outside of ourselves, and look to more of us as a community, as a togetherness, and be there for one another, I think is beneficial.
Yeah, and that's the great battle, the separation of one from another. A friend of mine just the other day, it was the funniest thing. He sent me a video and a picture of his daughter at Disneyland. And he was saying, you know, oh, you probably, his insinuation was, you with all your academic books and all that stuff, you probably can't stand Disneyland. And but it's our daughter's birthday and whatever. So they sent the picture, and I was like, au contraire. And I sent the picture of Cheshire here. I was like, I went to Disneyland when I was a kid. It's my favorite memories. Some of my best memory palaces are in Disneyland, in Anaheim and so forth. But you know, I didn't feel offended or anything like that. But it was just the strangest thing that there's this insinuation that because I read books and I have all these
That's
things
all you do, sitting there reading books and being academic all day, and you don't do anything else in life. Stop pigeonholing people.
That's what I had to do at my dissertation defense to get my PhD. I put my foot down, and I was just like, these guys, Adorno and their criticism about mass hypnosis and all that stuff, even if that were true, where's the evidence? Because I see a completely different set of evidence. Yes, there's this criticism we can make of the couch potato and so forth, but those are the people, if there is such a thing, that I want to be with. I want to be with the people who are the fans, not the, you know, beard scratching person who's all they got to do is criticize. And I asked, you know, you want my theoretical grounding? Get their theoretical grounding. Where's the hypnosis machine, and what is it directing its hypnosis at? And I've thought about it deeply, and I've written about how it's possible that some movies are trying to train soldiers to go to war uncritically and so forth. And there's something to it. But, you know, this is a means of creating separation between you and I, as opposed to what binds us is consciousness's desire to be quiet and to return to zero. Because for whatever reason, we come into this and then it goes back, and sooner the better. And we can have it here and now.
But that's the point. You know, a lot of people think about the going home, you know, at the death I'll find the peace. And I say, be the peace that you seek. You are the peace that is out there. When you find the peace within yourself, you know, then that is what you're resonating out. Whatever we are, angst, peaceful, love, hate, we are resonating that out. So, you know, what is our story? How are we portraying it to others? Is it the story we really want to tell? And when are we going to step up and be accountable for our own story and change it if we don't like it? Because whatever we are is what other people are going to receive from us. So if we want to be the solution out there, we've got to be the solution in here.
Yes. Yep, indeed. Make your own bed, as they say, before before taking on the world.
Precisely. You know, it's we're not an outside living life. It's an inside. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing. It's an inside out job. And you've got to know who you are, why you are, how to break down those doors that have, you know, held you in, and just break down the walls and realize there aren't any borders. You know, the boundaries may be frequency. I'm not going to go to a lower vibration. I'm coming up to this vibration. Come and join me. But there, you know, we're limitless in what we are capable of doing. And the more we're willing to explore that, and the more we're willing to open up our minds to the possibilities of what we can be. Look at how many people, I mean, I started podcasting at 57. And believe me, it was live for the first 13 months with a different network, and every button I pressed was wrong. And, you know, now I do my own editing. I do everything. I have done now for the number of years. And it's, if you told me I would be doing all of this before, no, I can't do that. And it's when I had to do that. And also I loved this part of it, which meant I had to learn how to do the other part of it. I had to train myself to do it. Then it just became something I do so that I can keep doing what I love.
So what's your secret? What made it possible, or how did you find the initiative to do it?
To learn all the out there, necessity. You know, it's, if I want this to get out, I've got to learn. And being dyslexic and having a few other issues, when it comes to technology and things like this, it's gobbledygook for me. So I would look for, what do I comprehend? Right? What do I comprehend? What can I do with that? What's the next step I comprehend? Or ask for help. I know, and say to people openly and honestly, I'm not wired your way. Please take me through the ABCs. And once I've learned 1, 2, 3, 4, And I've got that memory of that system there by doing it. It's there. And now I can expand on it because I have the basics. So I could expand to video, I could expand to other things.
Right.
Right. And so, and the limit is just my own limitations, which is time, as to how else I expand. But it was just that willingness and understanding. If I want to keep putting these out, I have to learn how to do it. I know the way I learn, which is I need to be doing, have it written down, 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, read it, do it a couple of times. Now I've got it. Once I've got that system there, I now know how to expand on it.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. I mean, it's the open secret in some sense that the steps are there, and I think that maybe technology isn't gobbledygook for everybody, but everybody's got their gobbledygook.
Oh yes.
And it's something like that process you described.
Yeah.
Just necessity.
But when the necessity and the desire is there, you find a way, right? That's the important thing. And it's like, please never say never. I mean, 10 years ago when I was doing this, the thinking I'm doing this now, 3,000 shows and all of that type of thing, never would have thought I'd still be doing this, still loving this. This is the only thing career-wise that I have stayed with, because I love it so much. That's the other thing. Why am I doing it? I love it. I love getting information out there to people that can help people on their own journey of life. That's my why. And I think if you understand what your why is in life, what is your driving force, what do you want to do with it, then that, I think, opens up the mind to willingness to learn.
Yeah. Well, the why thing is a big challenge. I never quite figured that out myself yet. but
you're still in exploratory mode.
I don't deny its importance, but I don't even know why anything exists, let alone why the concept of why exists. But
if you understand your why am I doing it? Because are you just mindlessly doing it because it's fun? Fine. But are you doing it? I have a mission. And I want people to have the skills and the tools at their fingertips if they're looking for that answer. So I want to be that library. I call it the orchard of wisdom. I want to be that orchard, ready for picking, and be that wisdom that you seek, because others are sharing that wisdom. It's up to you whether you want the wisdom or not. It's up to you whether you apply it, whether you reach out to people, but I want to give you that library. So it's there for when you need it. And I think the more and more people go through life, the more and more they realize what they need. And if you know that there's a source where it is, then, and you hear people of why they're doing what they're doing and what they're offering, it becomes the answer for someone that they may not even known that they were looking for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful.
So having said that, how do people get hold of your book? And the book is, The Victorious Mind of How to Master Memory, Meditation, and Mental Well-Being. Do you go through the book in explaining how one does that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that book is on Amazon. It's not difficult to find. And just anybody struggling with memory, I think that I've trained the robots enough that if you just put Anthony and memory into Google, I will come up. And there's lots of books that I've put out and so forth. But this book in particular is kind of asking you to do two things at once and teaching you two things at once, or giving you the opportunity. It's up to you whether you do it or not. But this book in particular is about bringing meditation and memory together. Now, meditation is a bit tricky because really, I mean, meditations, there's different forms of meditation, and inviting you to explore some of the ones that I've tried. And there's a story element to it because it's the journey from just chaos and just the most, well, not the most, but one of, on the tilted towards the more dramatic side of things. I'm sure there's many worse experiences than mine by far, but I had quite a tumultuous time. And so if I hadn't gotten things together, then I'd still be in that chaos for sure. So it's a story of how that happened and how memory training was involved, and then how memory training allowed me to take a meditative practice that I already did. Essentially what happened is a guy challenged me. I was quite a militant atheist for some time. And it's not like that much has changed in terms of whether there is a being or not. I mean, to me, it's irrelevant whether there's a being or not. Here we are, and this seems like more than enough. If you think of non-duality, right? It's like non-duality literally means not two, Advaita Vedanta, this and nothing else. Like, where else would the other thing be except for right here, right now? So basically, he just said, if you can memorize so much stuff, why don't you chant in your meditation? And I was like, oh, no, hell, that would be too much like this horrible church background I had, yada, yada. And he said, well, you should give it a try, because there was this guy, Gary Weber, who had the same thing. He required that whatever he was doing in his meditation was scientific and secular and all this sort of stuff. And it turns out in this ancient Sanskrit stuff, there is not even what I would call secular or atheist, but an uber atheist trend. It's like over the top atheist, because it's truly non-dual. It's like really one without a second. This is it. Tattvamasi, as they say in Sanskrit. You are that. So I memorized all that stuff that he suggested, which I can do quite quickly, and anybody could if they wanted to. And then some really weird stuff started to happen, where I started to experience what they're talking about in terms of, no separation and yeah. It's not all the time, but the scientific term is persistent non-symbolic experience, and it's wild. And it turns out that part of these practices, they mess around with parts of your brain, like the orientation association area, it's called. That's part of why you feel connected with all the things, as if there's no separation. That's a science story anyway. Anyway, long story short, I talk about exactly what I memorized, exactly how you can memorize it. I give examples that I used, but I strongly urge you to not pay too much attention to my examples. They're just there as, funny stories about quasi royalty or whatever was there, Ferguson, putting them together in this sort of mix, and just sharing the joy that comes from it, a little bit of philosophy, some of what the ancient world was all about, and then I leave you free to explore. And part of the message there is just become your own teacher.
Yeah.
Use this to become your own teacher. I talk about the real meaning of the word guru, which means the bringer of light. And there is only one guru, and that is you.
Yes.
And if you're trying to offload it or outsource it or yada yada yada, that's not what it's about. So
yeah, you can be inspired by other people's wisdom and knowledge, but how you apply it to yourself is how it's going to create the guru inside of you, right? It's just because their color is this, it doesn't mean your color has to be that, but you can take a variation of that color and it becomes you. And as far as this is really, we are made up of the universe is us, we are the universe, and we're all particles of each other, and we're all an algorithm. It is just a question of how we connect with one another in that algorithm, in that wavelength, in that connectivity. But really, we all come from one, so we're all part of one. But there is, I draw the analogy of, the discovery of what our beautiful musical instrument is, learning how to play it, and then discovering which orchestra to belong to. And then that orchestra is in your beautiful individuality coming together in harmony and succinctness to create that symphony that resonates out. But you can't have an orchestra of people who don't know how to play their instrument. So in order to be in that collective one and be of good and of resonance, you need to know your own instrument and how to play it.
Yeah, and I guess part of that book is my story of how I figured some of that stuff out, at least one instrument. But yeah, it's so important to work on those things if you can, and they're very, very rewarding. And I think you give yourself a great advantage. I don't think, I mean, it's just obvious. It doesn't have to be my opinion. If you give yourself the advantage of memory, you're going to go a lot further, a lot faster. And I think this is my bias. I think you'll get a lot more pleasure out of it as well when you start to master your memory. And a friend of mine, he's a I think 4 or 5 times he won the USA memory championships. Nelson Dulles, he said he's always thought that memory training was like meditation. And I think they are deeply linked, but I think you can more deliberately link them through these kinds of practices that I talk about.
Going back to what you were talking about, kind of looking at the house and all the individual rooms and then putting the people in it in order to remember them. There's a rhythm to it, a methodology to it, which really is a form of meditation to it. Right. Yeah. So it's that focus of that direction of honing in on something. What is meditation? It's the leaving of oneself and honing in on something. So
yeah, so that's the book in a nutshell. And
right.
You from our talk, you have the basic ingredients to just go out and start memorizing today. Just take a place, take something you don't know, and then look at the alphabet and weave some associations together, and then rinse and repeat.
Right. So, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what your age is, but especially as you get older, it's really advantageous. You're never too late to start. And your site is magneticmemorymethod.com. And that's where people can sign up for the free course. And that's where they could be a part, once they've gone through the free course, a part of that whole collective that you've going there. And you've also got your podcast on there as well, which is this just you in the podcast, or you interview people?
I haven't been interviewing people for quite some time. So it's usually just me, and the focus is on memory people. So I don't, or rarely do I go outside of the memory topic. And actually, I was just, speaking of learning and all this sort of stuff, I was just finally, after years of doing this, looking in Google Analytics and seeing like who actually subscribes to the website. And I thought it would be people about these topics and SEO this and doing all this writing about all this sort of stuff. The things that make this run are people subscribing to when I talk to other memory people. So it's I was just thinking I got to get more memory interviews going on. I thought people didn't like them, but that seems to be like one of the most biggest drivers of subscribers.
One thing I can tell you for sure, which I really do utterly believe, is people are hungry. They're hungry to know more. They're hungry for that connectivity. They're hungry to step into this love vibration, whether they want to call it or not. They're hungry to have, more clarity in their minds and their hearts and the souls being more open. They want to walk away from the fear. They want to walk away from the restraints. They want to walk away from that repression. And they do want to have better memories. And whether you want to have a better memory or better memories, I can imagine with people post-traumatic stress who has a constant memory of things that are causing them to be stressed about, learning to find things to enjoy more and focus more on that can help them with post-traumatic stress. So it's the embedment of our memory in all aspects, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I often mention to people, that there's no promise that with memory training or language learning or anything that you are actually going to avoid issues later on in life. But if you do devote your time to having better memories here and now, and being kinder to people as a result, or serving your community better as a result, then what may, chances are you're going to have a much more comfortable time at the other end, because they're going to, your karma is going to come. They're going to, you just imagine, oh, that person, he never cared, or he never even remembered my name half the time, that sort of stuff. You're going to get a certain treatment in your dementia Alzheimer's period, as opposed to, oh man, he spent his time learning languages. He knew everybody's names. He was a top performer because whatever at his job, and got all the raises and the promotions, took care of business, sort of thing, because of the quality of his or her mind. That's going to lead to better treatment if bad stuff happens.
Right.
So, and I mean, you can't live your life trying to have better treatment and so forth, but I often remind people of that.
Well, I think just the way you treat yourself is again back the reflection of how you're going to treat others. And if you treat yourself with kindness and compassion, that kindness and compassion is towards everyone else. And we can let go of the judgment. We can let go of the persecution for ourselves and for everyone else. And it's just, how about we give it a try? stepping into kindness, self-love, and compassion for one another. How about we feed that and see where it goes? Because I do believe that will in itself expand our memory, because there'll be memories that we want to have that will open up to even better memories to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and these are the kinds of things that have helped me, is just remembering simple things like using my hand as a Mary Palace, a bit of gratitude practice to open the meditation.
Yes.
A little bit of reminder of what it is I want the meditation to do, and then revisiting the intention and stoking the fire, and then a little bit of loving practice for all things, and then go on to the actual chanting of recited material. And that's just a simple thing. And the gratitude practice is huge for how it conditions the rest of the day.
I think it sets the psyche in a direction that you want to go. It's it's the very foundation on which to build from. So even a hard day you can be grateful for, because it just means that when you get a good day, you're just going to be so much more appreciative, right? So
Absolutely.
There's always something to be grateful for. So again, magneticmemorymethod.com. You're also on LinkedIn as Dr. Anthony. I'm going to spell your name, Metivier. You're also under Facebook, Twitter, and you've also been on TED Talks, so that's there as well. And your podcast is under your magneticmemorymethod.com, and people can listen to that there. And again, here we are putting out the show as an invitation. You have no idea what the effect is going to be until you participate. So how about you give it a try? There's a whole free program there. See what it does for you. See how it opens you up. Take it from there, read the book, and just be willing to participate. Read, listen, participate, and grow. It doesn't grow from a stagnant point.
I totally agree. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And also, so early in the morning, he joined us here, guys. So where he is. And the academic journey that you've taken is, whether it was atheist or not, has been quite a spiritual journey. And whether you want to call it that or not, but it is about that collectiveness, and just that we can be so much more if we're just willing to be. And by expanding our memory, it just helps us in every level of what we do in life. And I think it also gives our lives more meaning as to what we choose to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, the thing that I found is you can have the best of all the worlds. It's possible to have academic noodling all that you want, or intellectualizing and yada, 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 but then not take it so seriously. And, have the opposite end of the coin, which if you get to persistent non-symbolic experience, if you want to use that term, wow, that's amazing. You just sit there all day, just doing nothing.
Exactly. There is something very beautiful about silence and nothingness. It takes you to places that you yourself could not design for yourself. And if you're willing to go there, but it does take practice to get there. But when you do, boy, it's fantastic. So, but we could all do with honing in that memory, every single one of us. And you've got a method here, not a system, for people to apply to themselves. And until you apply it, you don't know what it's going to do for you. So reach out. Try the free program, read the book, have a conversation with you, and see where it takes you.
Well, thank you so much.
Until next time, folks, remember, all of the answers are within you and around you, but you've got to have the application of them. Nothing happens by just looking. It's when you apply that you start seeing the changes. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Find all of our shows on selfdiscoverymedia.com under podcasts or selfdiscoverymedia/shows. And for all our current shows, go to What's New. We are supported by you, the audience. You'll see a nice big shiny blue button for one-time donations, or follow us on Patreon and you will be able to support us there. We enjoy bringing you such wisdom. And the next show will be up in just a moment.